Hey, what's up? I am John Ricard. This video is a response to a video that I saw on YouTube. That video was titled, "Here's what needs to change to make Leica's Digital M the perfect event camera." So like the person who made that video, I use the Leica M10 for a lot of different events. I use it to photograph things like receptions, press conferences. I use it for behind the scenes at model shoots. I use it for street photography. I photograph jiu-jitsu with it, quite a bit of things. And often I have other tools that might seem to be better suited than the Leica, but I'll choose to use the Leica just because I enjoy using the camera. The thing is, it can be a little frustrating at times because there's these little things that aren't correct with the camera, and it makes it frustrating because you just wish they would fix that, and then it would be the perfect camera. So I'm going to go through all the points he made and give you my take on what he said, and then I'm going to give you my own things that I think Leica needs to do to make the M a perfect event camera. So he mentioned that they should have a locking shutter dial. Now, what that means is if I turn the shutter dial on the M10, I could just keep going around like this. So he wants a locking shutter dial that would not spin like that. And he suggested maybe something like the Fuji cameras where you lift it up to turn it, and like the old Nikons used to have. I disagree with this completely because I use the camera in manual mode. So if I were at 5.6, let's say I was at a high ISO 1600 and 5.6 and 250. So when I'm shooting, if I want to add light, I just roll the shutter dial like this with my finger. If I want to remove light, I just turn the shutter dial the opposite direction, and I know which direction to turn it to raise and lower the amount of light coming into the camera. So I need the shutter dial to be exactly as it is, that it can just turn without me having to fiddle with it. This is phenomenal exposure compensation. His next point was having a hard detent, is that how you pronounce that, detent, on the ISO dial. I like that idea. So he's saying that the way the ISO dial just keeps rolling like this is not good. It should lock, let's say, at 100, and then you could just turn it in your mind. If it were dark, you could just turn it and say 200, 400, 800, 1600, 32. You would know what ISO you were on if it were too dark to read the dial. I think that's a great idea. Another thing they could do is just when you first turn it, inside the camera, it could tell you what ISO you just turned it to. Maybe that could stay on for 2 seconds or so. That way we would know what ISO we were on, but we could still keep the viewfinder uncluttered because a lot of us do like that. He wanted a quieter shutter. I think that's a good point. As far as I understand it, the M10P version does have a quieter shutter, so I'm glad about that. I'm looking forward to getting a monochrome before the end of the year, and that will have the quieter shutter. So all things being equal, I'm always in favor of a quieter shutter, especially when I might be on set with other people who are using mirrorless cameras that have a completely electronic shutter that goes 100% silent. So I want mine to be as quiet as possible so I can match what my competition or guys on set with me are doing. He asked for a programmable button, something like the M240 has, a little button here where that was a movie mode button. I think that's great. I actually wish they'd bring the movie mode back. I thought it was pretty useful. I shot some pretty cool videos with the M240, despite the fact that the video quality looked a little smushy. Didn't look as good as really any other camera that shoots video, but I loved having that ability, and it was just a tiny little button there. So I'm all for that. I don't need a programmable button, but if you make it programmable, I'm fine. But put the movie mode there, I'm good. He asked for internal storage. That is a phenomenal idea. The Leica T that I own has internal storage, and it takes an SD card. I don't understand why the M doesn't do it. I don't understand why every camera doesn't have 64 gigs of internal storage. We know it doesn't take up any room because we know what size an SD card is. So just build that storage into the camera, so in case you forget the card or if you want to just be backing up images to the camera in addition to the card. Excellent idea. They really need to do that one. He asked for a larger battery. Now, I'm going to come back to the battery in a second, but for me, the M10 battery is actually okay. It's not phenomenal battery life. It doesn't really bother me to carry an extra battery when I'm shooting. I always have an extra one, so I'm okay if the battery stayed the way it is. Not a huge thing for me. All right, moving on to what I think they need to do to make this the perfect event camera. Number one, they have to allow us to get the rangefinder calibrated quicker. I sent my camera in at the very last days of 2019 for rangefinder calibration. So we're going to say basically they had the camera January 1st, okay? Essentially, it took till January 31st for the camera to come back for me with the CLA, the rangefinder calibration. That's 30 days. That's a month. That's close to 10% of the year. That's way too long to be without a camera if you're using it professionally. So they need to find a way to make that rangefinder calibration. If you send it, in my case, to New Jersey, it should be in Jersey for 1 day and it should be right on its way back to you. I should send it in Monday, have it back in my hand Friday. I think they should also make the Leica stores. I don't know how many there are. I know there's at the very least Los Angeles, Miami, and New York. And I understand those are basically independent stores that have chosen to become Leica stores. They're not really Leica stores to my understanding. Could be wrong about that. And they probably don't really care to do rangefinder calibration. That's not what they do. They're trying to be boutiques and sell these expensive cameras and sometimes expensive sweatshirts and art books and these other things. And they want to be a gallery. Fine. But you need to change that. If you really want to make this the perfect event camera, require those stores to do rangefinder calibration and make it a thing where we drop it off at 9 a.m. and we get it back at 5 p.m. We all understand if we use this camera that it can go out of focus over the course of a year or two. And it needs to be something very simple for us to get fixed, not something that we're out a month and we have to mail it in. If we live in a major city where people are shooting events like the MTV Awards and the Oscars and things like that, you should be able to put that camera in at the Leica store in the morning, get it back that afternoon, okay? Second, in that same category, they need to release the information on how to repair the rangefinder. Not repair it, but how to adjust it. I don't know how to do it. I've looked all over the internet and there is no good information on how to calibrate the rangefinder yourself. There's anecdotal stories on different forums about people doing it themselves. They never tell you how they do it. On the Leica user forum, when someone brings up the topic, they actually put up a hand-drawn picture that I can't decipher for the life of me that shows, well, you turn it this way and the focus throw goes that way or whatever. I mean, it's a hand-drawn drawing of how to calibrate something. That's insane. Today, everything is on video, and you would expect that there would be a video on YouTube that explains how to do it, what tools you need, and what you need to do. And from what I've read, there's something called a vertical calibration and a horizontal calibration. I have no idea what that means. One of them is supposed to be easy to do. It involves a screw inside here where the lens would be. And then the second one involves taking off this red dot and using some kind of tool to adjust it. I don't know how you adjust it. I don't know what you're supposed to do. And I'm sure in the minds of Leica, their attitude has got to be, well, this is a precision instrument. You can't just have some guy go and start messing around with a screwdriver trying to adjust the focus. But look at the time we're in. I mean, as a photographer, I've been shooting long enough that I remember when I used to shoot slide film. And sometimes I would take the slide film and, get it developed. First of all, you would get it developed in a couple of hours from the lab and you were done. You just took it, put it into pages and messengered it over to a magazine or whatever. You didn't do anything to the pictures. And then on print film, it was even more ridiculous. You would develop print film, get the contact sheets, look at the contact sheets with the negatives, put them in an envelope. And then I would just call a record company and say, the images are at my color lab, just come and get them. I mean, I didn't do anything at all to print film. You gave away the negatives. It was insane. But the point I'm trying to make is now today we're photoshopping everything, we're adjusting, we're keywording, we're adding people to images, we're removing people, we're color grading photographs, all of these things that people never thought photographers would be doing. So if you think a photographer can't calibrate the rangefinder, maybe you're thinking with like a 1950 mentality. You're not thinking 2020, this age of information that we're in, where maybe a photographer actually can learn how to calibrate his own camera. And I think they should release the information and allow us to do it ourselves so that if we know the camera is out of alignment, we could just grab a tool and fix it up and be able to shoot the gig that night. That to me is the number one thing that we need to do to make this a perfect event camera. Next on my list would be the camera needs to just be quicker and snappier, man. I mean, you turn it on, you wait, eventually you can take a picture. And if you leave this camera alone for 15 minutes, you have to go through the waiting process again. And I don't understand why Leica people just don't want to admit this, because if you write that on a forum, Leica people will tell you, Leica fans, people who've bought the camera, well, I don't put my camera to sleep and all these things like that. But listen to me. It doesn't matter what you set the camera on. I don't care if you turn the camera on and off, and I don't care if you put it on never go to sleep. It takes the same amount of time to take a picture after an hour. No matter what you set the camera on, the camera will go to sleep. and it's ridiculous. It needs to not go to sleep. It needs to just be faster and snappier. And I was really disappointed to find that the newest version of the M10, the M10 monochrome, is slower than the M10. And that leads me to the next point. Leica needs to make no more backwards steps. And this is what I mean by that. So they came out with the M9, which is a camera that I love. I love it so much that although I sold it a few years ago, I went and rebought it about a month ago. And I'm so happy to have this camera again, $2,200. I love the out-of-camera files from this camera. I've seen tests from David Farkas, and there was one on, I think it's called Street Silhouettes. And both of these guys really proved that there is no difference between an M9 file and an M240 file. And there's no difference between an M9 and an M10 file. I've seen those tests, and I understand where they're coming from. And when I look at those websites, I can't see the difference. But I know in my own photography, when I'm looking through images on my computer, and it's a folder that just has a ton of images from different cameras, the ones that pop out to me every single time are with the M9. So I went back and bought the M9. But the point I'm trying to make about the M9 is this. The M9 had a certain thickness. It wasn't as thin as an M7, but it was a decent thickness. It was the best they could do. Then they came out with the M240, and it was fatter. That was a step backwards. Now, what they need to do is not make any more steps backwards. And they've made a couple of steps backwards. For example, the M240 had a decent buffer. You got about 7 or 8 shots before you hit the buffer. Then they made the MP version of the M240, had a much better buffer. I think you might have gotten something like 30 JPEGs without hitting the buffer. And then they follow that with, I believe the number was M262, and it went back to the original buffer of the M240. That's a step backwards. Leica needs to no longer make steps backwards. Every time they make a new camera, it should have everything good from the previous camera and new improvements. The same way an iPhone 10 is better than an iPhone 9, which may not have even existed, but you get what I'm saying. It's better. Every iPad I buy has every improvement from the previous iPad and new improvements. They doesn't go backwards. And Leica's gone backwards a couple of times. Most recently, M240 had a movie mode. M10 doesn't have a movie mode. M10 had a good buffer, a very good buffer, and now we get the M10 monochrome, and it has a slower buffer, slower writing to the card, and slower playback of images on the screen. They can't do that. We need to, once we learn what a camera from Leica is capable of, we should just understand that the next camera is going to be better. We shouldn't have to figure out what are we trading, what did we gain and what did we lose. That is not the way technology works with any other product. And the few times that that happens in other areas of technology, people call out those companies and people are mad and those companies change it on the next model. Leica has not done that, and they really need to do it. Next, to make it a fully professional event camera, get rid of the base plate. There's no reason for this. We're done. We don't need it. The way they do the battery on the T, it's just gorgeous. The battery is flush with the camera, and you push this little thing and the battery slides out, and it's perfect. That's what they should have. And at the very least, if they continue to have the base plate, the least they could do is have a setting inside the camera that says, you know, yes or no, fire camera if base plate is removed. That way, if you drop the base plate or you lose it, at least you can still take pictures. The way it is now, if you lose the base plate, you cannot take any images, and it's ridiculous. One time I dropped the base plate and it bent just a little bit, and I could not get it to connect properly back to the camera. I couldn't shoot. It's durable in one sense that it's metal, but it's also not durable in the sense that just a little bend in the wrong place, it won't attach properly and you won't be able to shoot. So get rid of the base plate entirely is my suggestion. So those are some of my thoughts on what Leica needs to do to make the M10 a perfect event camera. And, you know, even though it's not the perfect event camera, I'm going to continue to use this camera as an event camera, as my primary camera on some shoots, and I'm still going to be using it every single day. I'm currently doing a 365 project with the M10 and sometimes the M9. You can see that on my Instagram. Hope you'll check it out. If you have any thoughts, let me know on any thoughts on what I talked about. Let me know.